Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're diving into a really wild one. To boot, the 400-year curse of the Nishir Molo. Grab a virtual seat around the campfire because we are unpacking an absolutely chilling supernatural mystery. We're looking at a story that blends dark fantasy, historical betrayal, and a completely terrifying present-day haunting. If you've been following the bizarre events happening in the village of Berhampur, you already know things are escalating so fast. So, let's jump straight into the source material and uncover the horrifying truth behind this ancient curse.
Right, so to really understand this curse, we actually have to start with the present-day terror gripping the village. Specifically, we're seeing this through the eyes of a young woman named Meghna. The core question driving our explainer today is, who exactly are the Nishir Molo, and why on earth have they returned? See, Meghna is suffering from these intense, vivid nightmares where she sees herself as a princess wandering through an ancient palace, only to wake up screaming because a cold hand touches her shoulder. And while her friends kind of just dismiss it as stress, the looming supernatural threat right outside the village walls is very, very real. Everyone is literally terrified of the dark, hiding from entities known only as the Nishir Molo. Meghna's dreams aren't just your standard nightmares. They are actually echoes of a forgotten history.
Then, the tension reaches a boiling point at exactly 7 p.m. The weather just suddenly turns foul, casting this really dark pall over the entire village. And right then, the highly anticipated Tantric Maharaj arrives. But he's all alone. He delivers some incredibly grim news. His disciple has been killed, and the spiritual wards protecting them are completely failing. To even survive the night, he orders the entire village to take shelter inside the walls of the old, ruined fort. But he also brings an ominous warning. You see, hiding behind stone walls simply isn't going to be enough. To truly defeat this evil, they have to unlock a dark, blood-soaked secret from the village's past.
Okay, so once everyone is safely gathered in the flickering torchlight of that old fort, the Tantric sits on a high mound and he begins to speak. He essentially transports the terrified villagers, and, well, us too, back exactly 400 years. We're going to the year 1626. This is the era of King Vishwajit, the ruler of this very land, and to understand the monsters hunting them tonight, they have to understand the catastrophic failures of the man who ruled 4 centuries ago.
The situation back in 1626 was honestly desperate. The kingdom wasn't peaceful at all, it was being absolutely ravaged by a deadly plague. People were dying in the streets, and the whole kingdom was teetering on the brink of total collapse. The king's own daughter, the princess, basically begs him to take action. And King Vishwajit? Well, let's just say his priorities were horribly, horribly misplaced. On a trip to seek help from a neighboring kingdom, his chariot happens to break down in the forest, and that one little event alters the course of history forever.
While he's stranded out there in the forest, the king meets this impossibly beautiful, mysterious tribal woman named Damayanti drawing water from a well, and he is instantly obsessed. He completely abandons all thoughts of his dying kingdom just to marry her right there on the spot. He brings her back to the palace and just entirely neglects his royal duties. Meanwhile, his daughter, the princess, is left to fend for her people all by herself. She really steps up, dedicating herself entirely to finding a mystical cure for this horrific plague that's destroying her home.
And guys, the princess actually succeeds. She performs a deep spiritual ritual, a Mahasiddhi, and obtains a magical seed. She takes it, plants it deep in the forest, and waters it every single day until it grows into this mystical tree that literally drips a glowing green nectar. This is known as the Mrityunjay Amrit. Just 3 drops of this incredible substance can cure any disease. So completely independent of our hopelessly distracted father, the princess begins administering this nectar to the sick. In just 2 short months, she miraculously eradicates the plague from the entire kingdom. It's a real game changer.
But of course, while the kingdom is busy celebrating its salvation, a very dark shadow falls over the king's chambers. One day, Damayanti's stunning beauty just vanishes in an instant. Right in front of the king's eyes, she rapidly ages, transforming into a withered 100-year-old woman. And then she drops this terrifying confession. She says, "I am not a normal woman, I am a Dayan, a witch." She explains that a Dayan maintains her youth by feeding on the life force of men, but she had actually refrained from doing so, and now her natural lifespan had caught up with her. She was dying.
So what happens next? Well, Damayanti gives the desperate king a horrific ultimatum if he wants to save her life. It is essentially a gruesome recipe for dark magic. First, they have to wait for the auspicious night of Ekadashi. Second, the king must acquire the bodies of 11 recently deceased humans. And finally, she must bathe in their freshly drained blood. Yep, you heard that right. Only this unholy ritual will restore her youth and save her life. And King Vishwajit, who is completely blinded by his obsession, actually agrees to do the whole shebang.
To pull this off, the king enacts a truly tyrannical law. He just straight up halts all cremations and funeral rites in the village. Whenever someone dies, his guards violently seize the corpse, mutilate it, and harvest the blood for Damayanti's bath. And amazingly, he successfully steals 10 bodies. 10! Just let the absolute horror of that number sink in for a second. 10 grieving families robbed of their right to mourn and lay their loved ones to rest. Obviously, the villagers are outraged. In their belief system, denying the dead their final rites means their souls can never find peace. The sheer injustice of this pushes the common folk to their breaking point, and they actually organize a secret rebellion.
Now, the villagers realize they can't exactly fight the king's heavily armed army out in the open, right? So they devise this brilliant, covert plan. They appoint 4 incredibly brave men, dressed in simple brown robes to act as secret night pallbearers. These 4 heroes are called the Nishir Molo. The plan is simple but dangerous. Whenever someone in the village dies, the family holds no public mourning at all. Instead, at the stroke of midnight, the Nishir Molo arrive, silently place the body in a coffin, or a taboo, and sneak it out to the cremation grounds to perform the final rites without the king ever knowing.
And for 15 whole days, the plan works perfectly. The king is furious because suddenly, quote-unquote, no one is dying, which is keeping him from getting that 11th and final corpse for his witch queen. But sadly, the peace doesn't last. The king deploys hidden spies who eventually discover the midnight cremations. On a dark Saturday night, as the 4 Nishir Molo are carrying a coffin to the pyre, the king's spies ambush them. In a brutal clash, the spies slaughter all 4 innocent pallbearers, stealing that final corpse to complete Damayanti's bloody ritual.
So, the 11th corpse is delivered. Damayanti bathes in the blood and emerges from her chambers the very next morning with her horrifying, radiant youth fully restored. The king embraces her in the royal court, completely ignoring the sinister gleam in her eye. But, actions have consequences. Because the 4 Nishir Molo died violent, untimely deaths while performing a deeply sacred duty, their souls could not cross over. A dark, inescapable curse was born that day. The spirits of those 4 men, forever bound to the heavy wooden coffin they were carrying, began to wander the village streets every single Saturday night.
Now here is the absolute tragic irony of this 400-year curse, and it shows us exactly what happens when good intentions are violently corrupted. Back in 1626, Nishir Molo were the innocent, brave protectors of the village's dead. But today, they are terrifying, vengeful spirits hunting the living. Why? Because these ghosts don't actually know they are dead. They are trapped in a loop of their final, violent moments. So whenever they see a living person at night, they mistake them for the king's murderous spies trying to stop the cremation. They attack with brutal fury, genuinely thinking they are still defending the dead.
The tantric finally finishes his chilling tale, proving that buried history never truly stays dead. The villagers finally understand the tragic origin of the monsters lurking outside. But wait, the tantric isn't finished. He reveals that just knowing the history isn't going to save them. To finally put the souls of the Nishir Molo to rest and break the 400-year curse once and for all, they need a specific ancient text. It's called the Birampur Puran. This book details exactly what happened to the king, the princess, and the Dayan after that fateful night. But there's a massive catch. It was hidden away in a secret chamber somewhere within the royal palace centuries ago.
So now the tantric must perform a dangerous ritual right there in the fort to locate the hidden text within the massive palace walls. But what about Meghna? Why has she been dreaming of walking those exact palace halls as the princess? I mean, is she a reincarnation? Does she subconsciously know where the Birampur Puran is actually hidden? The pieces of this 400-year-old puzzle are finally coming together, but the Nishir Molo are still howling outside, and the night is far from over. So, what do you think her connection really is? We'll have to wait to find out, but one thing is for sure. Some secrets refuse to stay buried.